All right, teammates. We are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the number one show on innovative teamwork. Great to have you. Looking forward to having you back for some more. To my regular listeners, let me tell you, you the guys know what I'm all about. Again, whatever your challenge is, whatever your obstacle is, whatever you feel is getting in the way of wherever you're trying to go, I am here. This show is here every day to show you or tell you you're not going through it, or indirectly tell you you're not going through it alone. But I got to tell you today, I am pumped because the lady that I have on has this term named lazy leaders. Like she's on a mission to rid the world. I'm going directly off her site, on a mission to rid the world of lazy leadership. And if you've been following me for any length of time, you know that term lazy leadership is like a trigger for me because it has been the thing that drives me absolutely insane. So when you're able to connect with folks that are talking your language, I gotta tell you, I'm pumped. And this is no slight to anybody else who's been on the show, but just know we're gonna get into a whole lot. Julie Holunga, welcome to the show. Let's get into this.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad to be having this conversation with you, Aswan.
Yes, and the thing is with this one now, we were supposed to actually be scheduled to do it last month. So I was like prepared. I watched your TED Talk. I've been keeping up with all your work. And, so I'm a little like really versed in terms of the research I've done on you because, again, regular listeners know I do my research. Don't nobody, it's not just anybody that comes on this show. All right. So let's get it started with like just how you grew up because what I know about folks who really focus on leadership and really make it their life work, there were certain things that they were burdened with. There were certain principles that they had growing up. So I'll give you the microphone to kind of speak a little bit about some of the things you learned growing up, and then as you transition into this world, where you're consulting with folks, I'll kind of let you take it from there.
Sure, sure. Thank you. So I grew up, I was born in New York City, but grew up most of the time overseas. So for 7 years, we lived in Paris, New Delhi, and Hong Kong.
Mm,
And having that been at a time that was such a formative time for me,
all right.
growing up and observing different cultures and how people
Yes.
communicated with one another, and certainly starting first grade in Paris, not in a French school, not speaking a lick of French, that
Mhm.
had a huge impact on me that I wasn't fully aware with at the time. But certainly as I became a professional and saw how people were
Yeah,
communicating or weren't communicating, it brought me right back to
exactly.
sitting in a room and not understanding what was going on. And at that time, it was because of language. But,
Mhm.
I always joke around with people. We've all been in those meetings where we don't know what people are talking about. We don't know what they're asking, or we don't know what they're sharing.
Mhm.
And certainly cultural differences being in Asia, vastly different than what I had grown up with, just really reinforced this fascination that I have in people and what makes them tick and what excites them. And as I've gotten further in my career, really understanding their brains and what makes your brain, although structurally they're the same, but we think a little bit differently.
Right.
And I started my career in Boston working at Harvard University and with the best of the best people. So I either have people say like, "Wow, you pay attention to so much detail. That's impressive," and I have other people who are really frustrated, like, "All right, we got it. Like, let it go. It's good. Like, let
Right.
it go."
Yeah, and
Um,
not to cut you off, but I strongly
yeah,
recommend you guys, if you have not listened to it yet, go listen to her TED Talk because she calls not only herself out, but she calls everybody out in terms of the language you use, in terms of how you
right.
saying, don't disqualify. I have it memorized you, but she said, don't disqualify yourself from a position by saying, really? Oh, is that
Yeah.
like there's so much that you learn. And as I'm sitting here listening to you, I'm realizing, hey, you were in certain cultures and then
Mhm.
got to Harvard. A lot of times
Right.
people think that just going to Harvard is going to solve the problems. No, you had experience in other
Yep.
cultures, and then you go to Harvard and you realize, hey, these are just humans. These are just people. These are just kids that
That's
need
right.
they need instruction just like everyone else.
That's right. That's right. And that time where one of the reasons that I got into what I'm doing is because I didn't have the support. I didn't have the knowledge when
Right.
I started my career. So
Right.
I was the person who would not sit at the main table and would put myself back or downplay any expertise or knowledge that I had. And
Wow.
I don't want to see that happen in other people or in our next generations coming into the workforce.
So as
So
you as
yeah.
you're coming up though, one of the things that I really wanted to get your thoughts on because as you're moving toward this direction, social media is becoming a thing. And
Yes.
people are now able to hide behind their devices. And when it comes to what you're talking about, when it comes to leadership, how do you communicate? How do you really look people in the eye, shake hands? All these soft people skills that are important towards getting a position, they're kind of being lost because you can hide behind your phone. And you had just expressed, hey, you were that person that wasn't as confident as you used to be.
Yes.
How are you navigating those transitions, those cultural norms that were happening for you? Like that was just happening. No one had control over it. It just was,
Yeah.
we got to deal with it. Just like COVID, you had
Right. Yeah, you got to get on board or you're going to be
right.
left behind. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's funny too, because for the longest time, I didn't use Instagram. I didn't use like social, anything like that. But when I put my first book out there, like, look, you have to have it. You
Yeah,
can't
you have to.
have this stuff and not be putting your stuff out there regularly.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And it is a necessity, right? It's the world that we live in. If you don't get engaged in that
Hmm.
way, then like I said, you'll be left behind. But what I always recommend to people, and I've even said this like when my kids got on social media, who do you want to be? How do you want to show up?
Hmm.
And always have that in mind with whatever you're writing or liking or following,
Hmm.
because that's a reflection of you. So if I, you know, show up and have a certain conversation with you today,
Hmm.
but then on social media, I'm doing something completely different and showing up completely differently,
Hmm.
that's that's not a good way to be a true conscientious deliberate leader, right? Like when we're talking about lazy leadership,
Yes.
right? Like I don't want to work with someone, I don't want to hire someone
Hmm.
who says one thing and behaves another,
Right.
right? And I find like the lazy leadership is doing just that. But
Right.
if you are conscious, deliberate, you're behaving with integrity,
Hmm.
then you are showing up day to day, just as you're showing up on Instagram or
Right.
Twitter X or LinkedIn, whatever the
Whatever.
platform is.
Right.
You want that consistency so people know what to expect of you.
Yes.
Because there's no better way to confuse or lose trust with someone
Hmm.
to say one thing or write one thing, post one thing, and then behave a different way. And I always tell people, I said this to my kids, like when someone shows you their true colors, I believe this
Oprah
was it? Yeah,
is Oprah.
who said it, right?
Believe
Like
the first time when
believe them the first time they showed you their true colors. Believe them,
the first time,
right?
not
They're
the
telling
second
you, they're
time, not the
showing
third
you.
time, the first time.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And that's like I even heard her say it again yesterday, and I'm like,
Mhm.
yes,
Yeah,
like
I that quote
exactly it.
famous. I mean, as you guys can see again, the great minds think alike. That quote,
Yes.
I knew exactly where you were going because you brought it up. Lazy leadership and my
Yeah.
being I have a sports background. Then I got into fitness and education, and between those three industries, there is a slew of lazy leadership. It's great
Yeah.
industries to be in, whether it's fitness, athletics, or education. But because they're so big entities, they're such big entities, it's hard finding people that really do go above and beyond when it comes to leadership. They go above and beyond what their job at what their expectations are. So I'll give you an example. The youth program I played for, Coach Brian Davis, he transferred us or he transitioned us to Pop Warner one year, and it was the
Uh-huh.
day of the game, and we realized we actually needed cups, but none of us had cups. So Coach Brian, who started the organization, he took money out of his own pocket, went to Kmart
Wow.
and bought the entire crew cups.
Wow.
I have crews here. There's people here who I've met in fitness and education that can't even show up to work on time.
Yeah. Yeah.
People that, are
Yeah.
thinking about, I mean, and we're not talking about just employees, we're talking about owners who, are just kind of blowing it off, finding every excuse in the book not to show up to work. So when it comes, and I want to give you the opportunity because I really am wanting to, talk about this, ridding this world of lazy leadership because when you talk about social media, it's so important that we get rid of it because we have access to every human being. And I don't want people to be stuck in a situation where they're around lazy leaders. When it
Yeah.
comes to how you actually planted your flag on, hey, this is what I'm going to remove, this is what I'm going to show up as, what happened? What happened in
Yeah.
your life that made you say, look, I gotta speak on this because I
Yeah.
can't take it anymore.
Yeah. But because I was seeing it all the time and it exasperated during quarantine for sure. because there was so much on our plates. And for people who had young kids at home and were trying to school
And
kids
you even
or,
it wasn't even like something that you were dealing with. It was like almost just like like I guess the world around us, the things that were happening.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
got
I mean, I certainly saw it before that. And I'll tell you, there's one of my clients called me one day, emailed me and said, I've got a tough situation going on.
Mhm.
I got to talk to you today, which, I always want to have, like, I call them like the sick visits. When you go to the doctor, they always save part of the day for sick visits. And
Yeah.
so I said, all right, let's get on the phone. And
Mhm.
we talked through what was going on. And he had to give some feedback, some tough feedback to a colleague. They were peers from a mutual client that they both worked with.
Mhm.
And so he called me to say, like, okay, how am I going to do this? And I don't like, they were friendly. They had a fine relationship. They weren't super tight.
Right.
Um, but it was fine.
Right.
And so we talked, half an hour in, and he says to me, "Oh, this is great. This is great. Okay, could you just come in and talk to Lynn?" And I was like, "Oh, come on, buddy. I'm not going to do that, right?" And he
Uh,
was somewhat joking,
right.
but he did admit, like, "Oh, no,
Yeah.
no, no. I really don't want to do this." And it all came down. I mean, and it ended up being a really interesting conversation because, like, okay, what's really going on? What's underneath the surface here? And he didn't want to be the one to give her this feedback because it wasn't the first time. So it was like other people had avoided it. And
Hmm.
he had made the decision, I'm not going to avoid giving it to her, even though he really wanted to, but
Yeah.
because it's been going on for too long.
Exactly.
And it cannot continue because it's going to get to the point where it's going to have more of an impact on our team.
Yes.
And so, you know, he had the insight, which is great to actually go and have the conversation. But
Yes.
what I was seeing with lazy leadership was people weren't having the conversation, right? And I always say, you're sweeping the conflict, the misunderstanding,
Mhm.
the lack of feedback under the carpet. And you know what happens? People trip over that, right? Because that you sweep it under, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then people are tripping over it. And
Yeah.
it becomes more disastrous than it needed to be.
1000%.
So what I always say to people is the reason I'm on the mission to rid the world of lazy leadership, the behaviors of lazy leadership, is because I know how much better leaders, teams, organizations as a whole
Yeah.
are when our leaders behave with integrity, they
Mhm.
see conflict as a necessity, and they know that they need to continually build and hone their trusting relationships.
Mhm.
And when they focus on those three things, they are deliberate and conscientious leaders. And that lazy leadership just goes away. And what I've seen more recently in the last few years is that we're so busy. We're going so fast. We're in this global environment. Most of my clients, a lot of my clients have teams who are different time zones, different countries, different continents. And they're going so fast because there's so high expectation and so much on their plate that they don't have time to step back and paint the picture, for instance, of, like, here's what we're trying to achieve. This is what we really are doing
Right.
and where we're getting to, what we're trying to get to.
Mhm.
Because, like, that in the moment that feels like, I don't have time for that. I don't have time to take that 5 minutes to paint that picture.
Right.
But that's lazy leadership.
So the example that you share, and the reason I'm re-emphasizing it is because when you think about something being swept under the rug, which is
Yeah.
what every last one of us are guilty of doing. I mean,
Yep.
not one person has not done because it's so easy to take that route.
Totally.
Or you saw somebody like for when the gym I used to work at, there was a guy who would show up late every single day, and the owner would make a joke about, oh well, he's Colombian, so they're always late. Like it would be something that you joke around about until COVID actually happened, and
Yep.
it got to a point where he just stopped coming in general. When we actually needed to work as a team, he just,
Right.
took clients, took members, and that small thing. And I remember having this same conversation with him. That small thing now has led to your business he's out of business. It's gone. It's permanently closed
Right.
at this point. So when you speak about, having that conflict, I think it's important that you elaborate on it a little bit because people look at conflict as a bad thing, but you've
Hmm.
actually just expressed it as it's actually a good thing. If you can get into these discussions with people. Obviously, again, be respectful, be
Yeah.
deliberate, but that conflict means that you care. It shows that you care. So can you kind of
Yeah.
elaborate a little bit on what you mean when you say, that conflict is something you should actually be kind
Yeah.
of seeing and making sure it is happening every day?
Yeah. So I like to think of it as when you notice you're in conflict. So maybe you had a misunderstanding. Maybe you
Mhm.
have a difference of opinion.
Right.
You know there's something going on. Like I know for me, I know I'm in conflict when my shoulders rise up and like I said,
Yeah.
they become my earrings.
Yeah.
I know I'm in that moment and
Right.
I pause. That's the best thing that leaders, if I could have one thing that every leader would do is just to take a moment to pause. Okay, I'm in conflict or
Another
I'm
that
approaching.
I just experienced that. I teach, right? I teach and I we're in Florida, so the weather's good out here. So we're playing
Yeah,
football, and you get one of these kids looking at me, and because I'm around kids, I can't go to like college coach, high school coach as one and start losing it. So I have to.
right.
He's in fifth grade. I
Yeah,
have
take a breath.
to take a breath
Yes.
and
Yes, exactly.
breathe and do what you
Yeah.
just get to this interview. Get to Julie, and she gonna coach you up. She gonna give you a little.
Yes. Yes,
You're
exactly.
calming down. So you helped me today, just the idea of it.
Yeah, exactly. Because when you take that moment and you took a breath, you're like, okay, what do I really need to do? Or what do they need from me in this moment? And
Yes.
who do I want to be? And it's not when people practice that pause, it becomes really quick,
Right.
right? But taking that pause moment and saying to yourself, okay, I'm in conflict or I'm approaching conflict. This is building.
Yes.
And I say, you have one choice to make, just one.
Hmm.
I'm either gonna get on that destructive path
Right.
or I'm going to get at the constructive path. And the difference is when you are focusing on the other person, as one, you just pissed me off, and
Hmm.
now I'm feeling escalated, and you said the wrong thing, and you're always late, and I start that avalanche of thoughts in my mind.
Hmm.
That's destructive. I'm focused on you.
Right.
As opposed to being on the constructive path, I'm thinking about the task or the situation or the
Mhm.
circumstances we're under. You
Yeah.
know what? As one, you're always late.
Hmm.
And here's what's happening. When you're late, this is the impact it has on the team, or
Hmm.
this is the impact it has on our kids, or this is the impact that's going on. What can we do to make sure that our team is supported?
Right.
And so it's less about me pointing the finger at you and more focusing on the task or our goal or,
Mhm.
and less about the person. And it's amazing then what happens is one is that you find out something that's going on. Like my sense when you shared that conversation about your colleague who was always late,
Right.
like, I don't know, is it because he's Colombian or what's going on with him?
Right.
Right. So this happened with a client of mine, and there was every Wednesday when they had their team meeting,
Mhm.
this one individual, we'll call him Mark, was always late for the 9 o'clock meeting.
Hmm.
And people were judging. Oh my God, he can't get his act together and he's always late. And what's he doing? Well, it turns out when my client sat down with him and said, hey, Mark, what's going on?
Hmm.
We want you to be part of this conversation. We want you to be at this meeting. It's not just about being late, but you're not engaging. You're not sharing information. We want to hear from you. You have a great expertise. You have great ideas. And it turned out that Mark was taking his next door neighbor for chemo every Wednesday,
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
right? It completely shifted the conversation. Of course, he showed up late because, he wasn't able to get his neighbor in. They weren't always on time.
Hmm.
And, every Wednesday that would be weighing heavy on him that he was
Absolutely.
d doing this.
Absolutely.
Completely shifted the conversation.
Hmm.
In the end, my client encouraged him to share with a couple of people, hey, this is what's going on. I don't want sympathy. I don't need anything
Exactly.
except could we make the meeting at 10?
Exactly.
Done.
Done.
Nope. No problem.
And,
Easy.
but what gets me about that, Julie, is all it takes is communication.
Exactly.
All it
And
took
honest.
was an honest communication. And
Yeah.
this is primarily the people that tune into my work are business owners. And business owners, I want you to really put your ear close right now. Because had the owner and the colleague I'm referring to, had he just communicated to this colleague, hey,
Exactly.
Oswald is there from 5 to 7. So
Yeah.
that's no breakfast. I run every single morning. I run before I start work, and he's
Yeah.
there. So by the time 7 comes in, he just wants to go get some breakfast, but he can't
Yeah.
leave the gym. He can't leave the gym
Yeah.
unattended to. And if he has to wait for another, 2 hours when you get here, that's
Yeah.
a long time without breakfast. He does that, boom, he's there at a time.
Yeah.
Again, it's not that crazy, but you just never communicated it. And
That's
this
right.
result, again, the result of not communicating something that you may think it may not be a huge deal, but over
Yeah.
time, you're gonna that go back to that example where things are being swept under the rug and swept under the rug and swept
Yep.
under the to the point where people are tripping over it, and it could have easily been communicated. Like that example
Totally.
you shared, that's incredible. Again,
Yeah.
somebody taking their neighbor to chemotherapy, all that stuff, but I think it's important for owners also to make sure you keep these lines of communication open so they feel
That's right.
comfortable enough to tell you what they're really going through.
Right.
No individual is just going to work without their own personal struggles. It happens.
Totally.
Like it's part of
Right.
what's going to go on. You as an
Right.
owner you have got to be cognizant of that. You've got to be mindful of that. And you got to be more importantly, you got to be empathetic towards that. You have
Yep.
to. I cannot stress the importance of that. So, all that
Right.
being said, I'm curious now when it comes to how you and you kind of already managed or spoke about this when you talked about your kids though when you're able to take the things that you're learning business wise and apply them in the home, how was that crossover for you? Because I know it could be because they could take a lot from you, but then when you're
Yeah.
trying to apply them, whether it's to a family situation, whether your kids are going through this at school, so much of
Yeah.
the stuff is being learned at home. Can you speak a little bit about kind of your overview philosophy when it comes to
Yeah.
taking this stuff and applying it to both your personal and professional life?
Yeah. So I will admit, I practice this all the time.
Yeah, you have to.
And
There's no way,
right?
no taking the
Yeah.
break off. Yeah, you can't
No.
take the hat off.
And and I'm not perfect at it. And so when, I had two kids in middle school,
Ugh, yeah.
uh, like my son still makes fun of me because he came in, I was on my iPad and he said something. I can't even remember what it was, the topic,
Right,
and I got so frustrated because he kept pushing and pushing, probably asking to stay out later or something like that. And
right.
I took I'm so embarrassed I'm actually sharing this, but we're going there. I took my iPad and threw it at him.
Oh God, yes.
And of course it broke, right? It didn't hit him. I don't have good aim.
Right,
I have other strengths. Aim is not one of them. But I could still use it. And I refused to get a new one because it was that reminder, like that was a low moment.
yeah, yeah.
You
It's
decided to,
funny too that you make sure you keep it so you know in your head. Yeah,
yeah.
that is
I
good.
never, and I felt awful. I couldn't sleep
Yeah,
that night. I felt awful. It was like the worst behavior
yeah.
that I was modeling for
Mm,
my child, how to deal with frustration.
right.
Right. And so that was a huge turning point for me. And that, all joking aside, I never want to be at that point again. And I have gotten a new iPad since then. But,
But
and now we laugh
yeah, I
about it.
think you should get that's from the son's perspective. Let him
Yeah.
have it so when he gets older, he gets his. It's kind of
Right.
remind, hey,
Yeah.
like it's a
Don't do,
family, yeah, family.
yeah. How not to be.
I'm not to.
Um, yeah. But now I do, I pause.
Mm-hmm.
And, when and both our kids, if they were feeling frustrated or there was that moment of heated, like, I would say to myself, like, they just need to vent right now. They just need a safe place. And it's the same thing in the workplace. There are times where people just need to, like, verbally vomit, And I will now say there's a great article in the New York Times that talked about this for parenting, but I think it works really well in the workplace as well. It's like someone comes in and you can visibly tell when people are frustrated, right? There's something going on. Maybe they're red in the face, like my shoulders are up, they're clenching their fists, they're talking really fast. There's a lot of cues for you, in addition to their words, that you can pick up on.
Right.
And instead of, as human beings, we want to help, right? We want to fix. And
Mm-hmm.
instead of going into fix it mode, which can oftentimes exasperate things, is to just say, what do you need from me right now?
Yeah.
In the New York Times article, they talk about a hug. Um, like basically, do you need me to listen? Do you
Mm-hmm.
need me to go into fix it mode? Or do you need a hug?
Yeah.
Right? Like, do you just need an ear for me to listen and be like, yeah, that's rough. That's harsh.
Right.
I know, I understand. Or
Mm.
do you need me to go help you fix it? And like guaranteed the vast majority of the time is I just need an ear. I just need you
You
to
know what's
listen.
crazy is that's what I was gonna say. Like
Yeah,
as we're talking, I'm thinking like most people simply need to be listened to. Most people just need to simply have it all air out and then move on. Like if
that's
most
right.
and I again, guys, look, regulars, I've done dealt with little toddlers all the way to grown individuals. All of them have vented, all of them I've heard tantrums, so many of things that I don't have time to
Yeah,
dive into it. But half the time, or more than half the time, 90% of the time, it's just a matter of listening and letting them get it out.
yeah,
That's
that's
really
right.
what it is. I mean, whether it's a
Yeah,
football player losing, he drops a pass, you just got to let them get it out and then
yeah,
move on to the next thing because that's the way the world works. That's the way life works. It moves forward. You are
yeah,
not going back. All right.
yeah.
It's not going back. You got to move
Yes. That's right. That's right. And I often hear that like from my family, from my friends, from clients, like I just needed to get that out.
forward. Right.
And I hear, sometimes that with clients, they'll come to me and they'll just talk and talk and talk. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, like we're not making progress or they're not further ahead or I'm not asking a powerful question or but all they needed to do, this happened, it happens every week. It happened yesterday. And for 40 minutes, my client just kept talking about this frustration and she should. And I was trying to ask, like, well, why do you feel you should? And
Mhm.
then she finally said to me, you know what? I just realized I don't want to be in that scarcity mindset. That's all it was.
Yeah.
I'm good.
A lot, so much of it does boil down to mindset. So, I do want to
Totally.
like I want to be very respectful of your time, and you've already mentioned, your clients and stuff like that. Can you just, for
Yeah,
anybody that's listening, describe who is your like ideal client? Who's the person that you
sure.
typically work with and all that stuff?
Yeah, so I work with business owners, I work with division leaders,
Hmm.
leaders of teams, and typically they come to me one of two ways. One is, hey, I'm leading this team and we're experiencing these challenges, or I'm new to leading this team. I
Hmm.
want to make sure I'm doing it really well. Or, hey, here's our team, and we're now global, and we need some help in coming together, building trust, making sure that we're aligned. Um, so it's sometimes it's an intact team, sometimes it's that intact team, and like a couple layers in addition. Or I find that there's a lot of challenges across teams that people don't think about.
Yeah.
So they often come to me, or a leader will come to me and say, "Hey, I want to work with you."
Hmm.
And we get into the work and we realize, like, okay, he or she is making some changes.
Hmm.
And so I always talk about like we're growing this beautiful pickle here, cucumber, excuse me.
Hmm.
And then if you go back to an environment that is a jar of vinegar, you're going to turn into a pickle.
Yeah.
So how do we make sure that that really beautiful, tasty, crispy cucumber
Yes.
maintains? I love pickles. I love all things pickled, but
I mean,
how do we make sure that the environment you're going back to is um, as effective, is aligned, is cohesive, happy, engaged, all these elements of a really highly value add team. And sometimes it's the environment, sometimes it's the individuals, and really figuring out what those things are and where they need help.
And where do you see? I know you've accomplished it a lot now, but what would you say is like the next phase? What do you see this thing
Yeah.
the next 10, 15 years or so?
Yeah. So the one thing, so, will continue lazy leadership and changing individuals.
Yeah, you
But
got a
what
lot.
I,
That's what I say. You got a whole lot. There's a lot of need in that area.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
It's tons of-
absolutely. Yeah. But what I am seeing and where I'm spending a lot of time the last couple of years is not simply, like I said, not simply the individuals, but the collective
Mhm.
and what it looks like working within teams or divisions to help them achieve what they want to achieve and not just because we've always done something a certain way that we're continuing with that. And I certainly see that in the last couple of years, right, where we're becoming, and we have been for over a decade, but we're becoming more and more global.
Yes.
It's so common with my clients that they have teams or they're working with vendors or uh, contractors on
Hmm.
a different time zone. And how do you create confidence in the leaders, in the business owners that work's getting done, even if they're not physically or visibly seeing it happen?
Exactly. That
Yeah.
There's a whole lot there. What's the where if someone wants to get in touch and everything, where do you normally send them?
Yeah, so you can go to my website, which is julieholunga.com. I always recommend for people to connect with me on LinkedIn. I have a lot of content there, but not too much. So once a month, I have a quick newsletter that goes out. I say it's less than a 5 minute. Usually it's around that 4 minute mark to
Okay.
read it. And it's both practical, but my goal is really to help people think about what they need and gain some insight to themselves and then the tools to act on that.
Okay. And that will also be included in the show notes as well. So, Julie, the final thing I do to close out all the shows is I want you to use your imagination a little bit. You are back to being, let's say you're back to being that first grade girl. You're in French. You don't know the language. You don't know where you're going to go. You have no friends. You have to figure it out. Pretend that that little girl has come into the Zoom room. Give her some words of encouragement, and we will officially close.
I'll just say, like, go for it.
Yes,
Like,
ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Go for
yeah,
it,
just
man.
do
And
it.
I listen, man, and I love again a football guy here. When you hear that word, go for it. We are recording this in the midst of a lot of college football playoffs going on. We got NFL football, so go
Yeah.
for it, baby. I can't think of a better
Yeah.
way to drop the mic, man. That is awesome. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
All
Yes.
right, fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.